Hi everybody and welcome to this recording around professional discussions for the structured observations for the Education and Early Years T-Level. So I'm joined today by my colleague from the moderation team, Laura Robshaw, and we're hoping to give you some tips and tricks and a bit of support around professional discussion based on our findings from moderation reports, from the chief examiners, and also from the feedback from yourselves as part of our assessor networks. So the idea of this session is that we're going to give you a bit of an example script for a professional discussion. Just a word of warning with this, it is an example. We don't expect that you're going to copy this word for word or that every professional discussion is going to sound the same. These are just some ideas of the language that you can use to support your students in not just contextualizing what you're observing, but also to help them showcase their knowledge when they're taking part in their structured observations. Would that be right, Laura? Is that the aim for the session today?
Yeah, definitely. Just giving some top tips. Gemma will model as the assessor, and I'll just be giving some advice on what students might say. We're looking at structured observation 1 for the EYE.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Laura. So we'll make a start. So as Laura said, whenever I'm speaking, I'll be taking the role of the assessor, and then hopefully Laura will give us some great tips and tricks for best practice when we are working with our students, and in this case for structured observation 1. Okay, so to start off as the assessor, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to introduce yourself. So we'll start off with, good afternoon, my name's Gemma. I'm your assessor today, and I'm at whichever college you happen to be at the time. And it's helpful to give the provider number as well here if you can. I'm carrying out a professional discussion for structured observation 1, in this case with Laura. So do make sure that you give the student's name there as well.
Yeah, and just you could also pass on to the student for them to say their own name for that authenticity. And if there's anyone else present in the room, for example, a moderator, it's also nice to introduce them on the recording as well.
Wonderful, thanks, Laura. Next up, you really do need to make sure that you've asked the students permission to record this. If you're going to record this during an audio, so if you're going to send in an MP3 timestamped or anything like that, please do remember to ask permission to record. As part of the observation, you're going to be watching your students carry out these skills and model these behaviours. So you might say, I've just observed you carry out a literacy observation with a small group of 3 and 4-year-olds. Can you please explain to me, using your plan, how you think the activity went and if you feel the learning objectives were met?
And here, some of the things for the student from best practice would be to share how their plan linked to the criteria. So think about if their aims were met, if it was age stage appropriate, if there was any examples of differentiation. For example, I plan to deliver a story and singing session to support children's learning development. The children were highly engaged, showing it was age and stage appropriate. The differentiation within my plan enabled me to tailor my questions and support to each individual child. An example where I asked one child to find me a card with a picture on and another child with an initial sound. I also asked one child to pass me 4 objects to support his counting, but I asked another to show me the number 4 based on previous observations of where they are at in their development.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Laura. You can see there that we're really asking the students to extend their knowledge and showcase what they know. And if students can do that, that's brilliant. And do make sure to say thank you to the student for their contribution to anything that you ask of them. And then we're now going to move forward and look through criteria for SO1. So we're going to start with S1.29, which is implement a range of pedagogical strategies to support children's early literacy skills. So during the activity, I observed you storytelling, using role play and singing songs and nursery rhymes. You demonstrated purposeful interactions with the group of children. Can you then just explain to me your understanding of systematic synthetic phonics and any other literacy strategies, please?
So yeah, here the student will share the knowledge of the phonics with examples of how they may have supported it. They could think about the age of the children they work with and how this may look for younger and older children, which would also help them support understanding of child development linking to 1.1. They might also talk about guided reading, one of the assessed skills, if this wasn't an opportunity to observe this, but they don't have to discuss anything that's been observed. So it is remembering just to complement the criteria and add things that have not been observed rather than repeat. If we've seen it, we don't need to discuss it, just using it to demonstrate further knowledge and understanding. Is that okay?
Thanks, Laura. And again, always ask the student, once they've finished speaking, just for that clarification, are you happy to move on, or is there anything you would like to add? If the student wants to move on, then that's absolutely fine, but it might just give them that opportunity. Something might have popped into their head as you were talking, and they've got something extra to add to the discussion. So the next criteria is 1.1, which is understanding the expected patterns of children's development from birth to 5 years and have an understanding of further development from ages 5 to 7. We're now going to ask the student to please contextualise the literacy activity you've just done and explain to me how you might adapt this for younger or older children.
Yeah, so again, here you'd expect the student to use the plan. So share their planning with you, share the expected milestones that they planned for, talk about if the children were meeting these, exceeding these, or needing further support. They can also talk about biological and environmental factors that may affect children's learning, and that would be mapped again to 1.4. When talking about how they may adapt for younger children, they should link this to the development milestones as well, saying rather than saying things like using an easier book, why, what level of development would that be, and what are children's next steps?
Brilliant, Laura. Thank you. Because as part of this, we're always talking about making those links between theory to practice, aren't we? That's
Yeah.
really important. So we might then say, as the assessor, can you then tell me more about any theorists and their theories that you've referred to within your plan?
Yeah, and again, encouraging them to use the plan. Did they see these in practice? Were there anything else that were used to inform the planning to enhance that understanding?
We might then go on to say, is there anything you'd like to explain a bit more about the individual rate and pace and how you could support holistic development?
Yeah, so here the student would demonstrate understanding that all children develop at their own rates and how the activity supported holistic development. And you'll be able to see from these questions that we're using how they link to the marking bands. So in order to get the higher marks, these elements all come under the 3 and 4 mark criteria. So it's really important that assessors use those marking bands and ask those further questions to support the students.
Definitely. It's very much about the extension of what you've seen here, isn't it, Laura? So
Yeah.
from that, are there any areas of learning that you've not covered yet that you'd like to explain more about? Are you happy that you've covered the age range birth to 5 and 5 to 7?
Yeah, so here we often see students focus just on the age range of the children they're working with. So by asking that extra question, you might encourage them to talk about other areas such as brain development and build on the discussion to share that knowledge of 5 to 7, which they may not have covered.
Lovely. So now we're going to move on to 1.4, which is children's learning and development in relation to their stage of development and individual circumstances. So you might say, you've touched on this previously within 1.1. Is there anything you would like to tell me more about? I can see in your plan that you have included some of the individual needs of your children and how you supported them within the activity. Can you analyse and explain how their learning and development can be affected?
Yeah, so here the student would share environmental and biological factors contextualised to the children they're working with. For example, if a child's living in poverty, how does that affect their development? Or if they've got a special educational need or English as an additional language. So thinking about children they're working with and how their development can be affected.
And following on from that then, could you explain any theoretical perspectives or statutory guidance and how that is used to consider approaches to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so thinking about the marking bands again, for the higher marks, students would refer to theory and the early years foundation stage and share examples of how they or the setting ensures inclusive practice. And just an example where they might offer a breakfast club for all children, but specifically this would be for children living in poverty that have not got access to breakfast before and help them all support the learning and development.
Lovely. And again, give your students the opportunity to add more before you move on. So have you got anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
Wonderful. So the next criteria is S1.31, and this is using observational assessments to identify children's mathematical skills and foster the use of these skills through play and structured opportunities. So thank you for sharing your observations before the activity. I can see how these have helped informed you plan, and I've observed you supporting mathematical understanding. You've already mentioned how this supported you to differentiate based on their knowledge, but could you explain a little bit more about how you use these assessments?
Yeah, so some examples here, it might be for the students share what kind of assessments they did, how they mapped it to the curriculum and how they planned next steps, how it informed the planning, what resources they used, and any effective strategies and what documentation that they used.
Thank you for that, Laura. Is there anything else you'd like to tell me more about? For example, how did the assessments help you identify and develop children's mathematical skills? Is there anything else you could have or would do differently? And did your activity extend mathematical skills? And how do you know?
Yeah, so here to demonstrate in their response that they're able to use observational assessments highly effectively for higher marks to enhance and extend mathematical skills. So considering how they do that and explaining will help those higher marks.
Okay, so are we happy to move on?
Yeah.
So the last discussion criteria for SO1 is S1.25, which is support and promote children's speech, language and communication development using a range of strategies. So again, here we're going to talk about what we've observed. So I observed you demonstrating a number of the assessed skills. Therefore, we don't really need to discuss these. Please just use this time to explain anything that we didn't get the chance to see today.
So here, commonly the students will talk about if they've not had the opportunity to use bilingual resources, an interpreter and one-to-one support, with the focus on how these strategies can support and promote speech, language and communication.
Can you explain anything from your plan linking to the current framework and any theory and additional research?
Yes, so for higher marks, best practice would be contextualise their activity, link into the EYFS, again using their plan, and any theory or current research about how to support and promote children's speech, language and communication.
Wonderful. And lastly, would you like me to go over any of the criteria, or are you happy with the responses you've given today?
Happy, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. And that's the end of the professional discussion. So we hope you found this really useful and you've gained a few insights into some of the language and some of the techniques you can use to support professional discussion as part of the structured observations. We really do want to give you all the support we can in making sure that you can really stretch and challenge your students and get them the best outcomes when they're taking part in these observations. And as Laura said, you know, they really do need to be looking at those marking bands, and some of the tips and tricks Laura suggested today hopefully will help your students level up and make it easier for you to see how they can fit within that band 4 response. So thank you so much for joining me today, Laura. And
Thank you.
we hope to do more of these videos in the future around SO2 and SO3. So if that is something that you would find interesting, please do get in touch and let us know if we can do those moving forward. Thanks very much, Laura.
Thank you.